Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
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 Well, we have 38 people in the room, which is amazing. Excited to see you all. And as we already have like quite a lot of people, I'm just gonna hit it off straight. Well, thanks everyone for being here, and Oliver, absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it and don't take it for granted. Really awesome to see so many people and so many faces and people actually turning on the camera or the microphone. Already love it. So
Yeah, awesome. And I know that you've recently became a dad and just came out of your paternity leave. So thank you for spending that time with us in the first weeks back to normal life.
yeah, I'm gonna give thanks back to my wife because she is like yeah, she's carrying our baby for now. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before I give you the spotlight, just really quickly, I wanted to talk about Cyan and myself. I think for most of you who are already here, you either heard of me or Cyan. But long story short, many years ago, I was a founder myself. Then I was running Google's Accelerator in London for a few years, and then I joined the dark side of venture capital, as someone say. And for all the reason I'm saying this is because all these years, like I worked with so many companies. We had 400 portfolio companies in one of the last funds that I was with. At Google, I worked with probably more than 1,000 founders. But the founders that were the ones that were closest to my heart were the one building in sustainability and building in nature. But guess what? These are the founders that get overlooked, that get the least amount of funding. So that's why Cyan was born with my co-founders here who I see. Thank you guys as well for joining. So the long story short about Cyan is that we want to build a platform and a community for ecopreneurs, scientists, academics, and founders who are building in the intersection of sustainability and nature tech. By the way, Oliver, I'm definitely stealing the ecopreneur term. Like,
Love
I
it.
love
No,
it.
go run with it. We need it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's your term. And as like Cyan has like this bigger vision and mission of being a space for these ecopreneurs, the first product that we're starting with is the Cyan Accelerator. Also happy to see some of our companies that are joining the accelerator. Thanks guys for being here. Yeah, if you are an ecopreneur, if you're building in the intersection of tech, ecology, and sustainability, the applications for the accelerator are still open until the 7th of September, so you still have like roughly a week left. If there's any more info that you need, drop me a line, or I'm just gonna post our website here. And yeah, I mean, what else can I say? Yeah, why are we doing these webinars? That would be a great way to start. As you know, NatureTech is kind of new, it's a new vertical. People don't really know much about it. Like, if I have to put my VC hat on, I feel like it was what sustainability and climate tech was 10 years ago. Like people heard about it, they're interested about it, but still not exactly for what it is. So that's why we started Nature Talks in this webinar series, where we invite people like Oliver, who are building in the intersection of tech, ecology, and sustainability, to kind of explain what nature tech is and set the ground for what we want to build here. And yeah, with no further ado, as you know, I can speak a lot. Oliver, would love to hear a little bit more about you. I know you have a very interesting journey. And also, I would love to learn more about Wildya, because I'm pretty sure that if people who join the call will be interested to learn more about the community.
Good. Yeah. Backstory about myself for people that don't know me, probably like 99%. So I talk about nature all the time, especially about biodiversity. I love nature. I've been loving nature since I was a really little kid. Just to get a bit of a scene of like how much of a weirdo I am. When I was 5 years old, I asked my mom to dress me up as an elephant seal. So these are like the massive seals with this like trunk. Spoiler alert, like at 1996, that's when I was 5, there was not such a thing as an elephant seal costume. So she actually had to create it. And this kind of love for nature was like born young, and just like stuck with me. But what I realized like when I was growing older is that not everybody shares the same passion, not the same love for nature. And I kind of lost my track there as well. You know, I was then a teenager. I played like soccer. You go out, you go partying, and yeah, all the things that you do as a teenager. Lost myself a bit, and then I realized, okay, when I had to decide of like what do I want to study, what do I want to do with my life, I realized, okay, why should I live a life for other people? Why shouldn't I do what I really love to do? And I love nature. How can I help nature, and how I can help animals in the best possible way? And we're basically two tracks. So do I want to go the classical track, so to say, like studying ecology, biology, marine biology, something like that? Or do I going to study business? Business, because at least in my understanding, businesses are the major reasons why we are in this nature crisis. Because in the triangle of power of like governments, companies, and citizens, I think they have the strongest leverage. And so I was like, okay, I need to understand the system, how it's currently working, to then be able to intervene the system from within. So I studied business, was working in e-commerce, was working in mobility, was working in travel tech, always in tech, and just realized that biodiversity, nature was just never even in the, not in the meetings, not in the boardrooms, not in the decisions, not in the OKRs. And I said like, okay, I can't do this any longer. Ventured out, said to myself, okay, I need to start something myself. And started Wildya. And Wildya started initially with a totally different angle. So if you're on this call and you want to hear more about ecopreneurship, it's totally okay if you pivot a couple of times. You will probably be pivoting. I started initially, it was an app that was helping people to combine mental growth with nature. And I quit my job based on that. I had basically nothing. I didn't have traction. I had maybe a website. I didn't have a working prototype. I didn't have that much savings, but I was just like, I had like such a strong conviction of like nature needs me, needs more support, and it needs some sort of an idea. And even if this idea is going to fail, I can't keep on sitting on the sidelines, because it's just not something I signed up for when I was like 5 years old. And yeah, created this app idea. 1.5 years in, realized, okay, this is like just not going anywhere, and started to pivot. Started to create like a biodiversity community that helps action takers to, in the biodiversity space, to just like collaborate more with each other and so forth. Realized, still too broad. And basically six weeks ago, I would say, we really nailed it down to, okay, you know what? Who we have been helping for the past 2 years were ecopreneurs, so the people that build nature NGOs, that build nature businesses. We've been helping them for the past 2 years. So why don't we just like focus on that? Focus on the thing that actually works, rather than keep on testing things that just nobody wants. And so that's what we do now. Wildya is there and has like basically 3 offerings. We have a community where we bring people together. We do something a bit similar where every Tuesday we bring in an expert to talk about their experience, to share soft skills, hard skills, and so forth. We provide like funding opportunities, tools, blah, blah, blah. We have a boot camp where we take people from the first idea to their first paying supporters. And we work on one-to-one basis where we consult nature NGOs and nature businesses and execute for them. So yeah, that's a bit about Wildya, where we are and where I'm coming from. You're mute.
It's very interesting because you're now like teaching and supporting entrepreneurs through something that you've already been through, which is I'm going to build for nature, but wait a minute, nature cannot be a client and cannot pay me. So how can I make this a sustainable business? What is, let's say, like one of your go-to advice that you give to entrepreneurs? Because you've seen so many flaws and like so many wrong turns that entrepreneurs have taken along the way while trying to build in that space?
I think it's fast experimentation. But most of all, I think this is like what it really comes down to, is like I realized over the years of my experience as an ecopreneur, I got better and better and better in experimenting fast and see what's worked and what doesn't work. And so at the beginning, you really fall in love with not often even the problem. You often fall in love with this idea that you had in the shower or whatever, and then you get super excited about it, and you tell your mom, and your mom is excited too, and then you tell your fiance, and she's excited, and then you're like, oh, you're super pumped up, and yeah, quite often then you stick maybe a bit too long with that idea. And so I think it's really about like, can you experiment in a very fast way if there's anything there, if actually anybody would like this? Because the issue that we have in the nature space, and I'm just going to talk about the nature space here, is that there's definitely a problem. So nature is like, we're losing nature all around us. So there's definitely a problem, but you're not selling to nature. Nature would give us like, if nature would have money, it would immediately give us money. You have to sell it to people. You need to sell it to governments. You need to sell it to corporates. You need to sell it to citizens. And you need to identify where in the priority list is that for the people? And can you tap into something to move it up the priority list? So how can we help nature in the best possible way? And so you need to experiment very fast of like, if the idea that you have actually solves any sort of pain point for them, so that you can solve nature's pain point, so to say. Experimentation, experimentation, experimentation.
Like I'm absolutely not surprised that you're saying this. Like a little side story, when we were building the program for the accelerator, I was thinking, first week we're going to focus on value proposition and then we're going to go to customer discovery. But then I chatted to a few of our mentors who are working with the companies, and we're super happy to have Chris Coleridge, who's a professor at Cambridge, and also he founded Carbon 13, which is a sustainability accelerator in the UK. And he was like, oh, no, 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 no. You want to start with customer discovery. That's the first thing that you do. Experiment, experiment, experiment. Because, one of the most common mistakes that ecopreneurs make is exactly what you're saying. Like you start building for nature, but nature can't give you money and you end up with something that's not sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on that front, then I want to ask you, from all these stories that resonate with investors and partners and the public, when it comes to the biodiversity and nature positive solution, what are the stories that resonate the most? Like,
I think what I tapped a bit into in the first answer is a bit like, what really often works is if you really get down to it, like, okay, what does the human in front of me value the most? What are their goals? And how can what I want to build for nature, how can that help them? I think that has been really I always adapt my story to whoever sits in front of me. So now, for example, what I share with you, I know the context of why you're here roughly. I know roughly a bit like who you are. So I try to adapt my message to you so that you get as much value as possible out of it. And so whenever I'm sitting in front of a person, no matter if it's a banker, if it's an investor, if it's a ecopreneur, if it's a concerned mom, I always try to use like argument. At first, I try to listen. So like, where's the person a bit coming from? What is their context? What is at the top of their mind? What's really important for them? Where do they want to go? What's the transformation that they would ideally like to see? And then I just like try to sprinkle in arguments like how nature is helping them, or how is nature affecting them? How is nature important to them? So if it's, for example, an investor, I can then make maybe the case of like, hey, this is actually reducing risk, or this is actually creating new opportunities in terms of like brand value. This is actually reducing your CAC, because in the end, like, people are more likely to use word of mouth, or it increases your lifetime value because people are more sticking around with you. For example, if you support Patagonia and you have a really great experience with Patagonia shirts, you're more likely to stay with Patagonia now, And so always adapt the message to whoever's in front of you. So I would say the clear answer is a bit like blurry, but the blurry answer is a bit like, okay, always adapt who sits in front of you and find the right message that fits to that person. So you need to build up a bit of knowledge of really like, what's the problem, what's nature having to deal with, what are potential arguments, but sooner or later you have a bit of an FAQ in your head of like the different arguments that you can use for the different kind of personas. Yeah.
and you say that you work now one-on-one with founders to grow visibility, sales, and traction. Like, what are the go-to advice that you can give about someone who is just starting, building in the NatureTech space? They want to build visibility. They have no sales, no traction yet.
So if they have no traction, then I think, especially like what you were sharing a bit earlier, interviews. So basically you need to find out like, okay, why do people don't want this? Who would like to want this? The people that want this and that are actually willing to pay for this, who are they? Or like, why would they pay for this? Like, what problems are you actually really solving? Because sometimes we think we're solving this problem, but they're actually they think you solve like a different problem for them. So that's what really is super valuable for them. So have a really clear understanding of like doing a lot of like the user interviews and doing a lot of user research. And then when you have those, when we're talking about like how to build visibility and so forth, then you can use these kind of insights to try to attract more of these kind of people. And so first you try to understand of let's say, let's give an example. You are working on coral restoration and you realize coral restoration is super, super relevant for surf brands, surf fashion brands, because in the end they're in the surf and surf is like determined by like corals. And so they have really invested interest in this. And you really see an uptake from surf brands. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, where are surf brands? Who is working for surf brands? Where are those people that make the decisions? Are they on social media? Are they like on offline events? Are they on certain conferences? Are there some surfing events that I can go to and so forth? So you try to immerse yourself in that world of that person that is most likely to support you, especially financially, because it's really nice if you're having a super excited user group, let's say students, but students don't want to pay you. Then you're a bit in the pickle of like, oh, okay, yes, it's really nice that you have tons of students on board that want to support you, but especially at the beginning, if you don't have traction, you're not going to get external financing. You only get external financing quite often if you have traction. And so in order to build traction, you first need to create a solid foundation. And that solid foundation is often built with people that like your idea enough so that to at least some extent they give you money. And even if it's maybe not exactly the money that you want, but at least it starts to build a bit of a solid foundation that you can kind of grow from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but would you say that ecopreneurs kind of struggle when they're talking to investors to balance that visionary impact with that business traction that actually needs to get them the funding?
Yeah, for sure. I think like the first mistake that I see all the time is like people think they can get external financing, which is like you're not even close to there yet. So like first, like we're not in this kind of scenario. It's not like AI right now. AI is a bit like you have a great funding team, you have a bit of an idea, you start to code a bit like something, and then you can pitch, and then you have a bit of a higher chance to get some external financing. For NatureTech, it doesn't have the maturity, it doesn't have the appetite, I would say, generally speaking. There's always outlier, generally speaking. So first you need to build up traction. And so a lot of people, they waste a lot of resources at the beginning because they think there's somebody that gives them this kind of paycheck in the future and that's going to allow them to build the solution that they have and so forth. But no, sorry, like quite often like idea, you need to have some traction, you need to have some things already that shows like, hey, there's actually an appetite for this. Your solution is to some extent working, an itch of somebody, and then you can go. So I think too early. And the second one mistake that I see often and often again is like just like the communication of like, what are you actually doing? Why is this? Why is it a problem to begin with? Making this problem actually big. So not just like, hey, this is a nice to have problem, but actually, there's always this saying of like, are you a vitamin or are you a painkiller? One is necessary. So, like if you're sick, you're really in for the painkiller. You don't know, vitamins is nice, but you're really in for the painkiller. So how can you create a solution that's actually really, really, really solving something? And just communicating this more effectively, problem, solution, how you solve the solution, what's this kind of financial engine, why do you have the best team and so forth. Just this communication bit is quite often really, really off because we're so inside our heads that we that we don't do enough like practice in terms of like simplifying it for people that are not inside our head or inside our bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that a lot as well. But before I continue with the next question, I start seeing a lot of our founders who are joining the Accelerator. I see Alex from Solmac. I see George from Nomadium, Atanas from Airlytics. Who am I missing? Victoria from BioBliss, Nikolai from Xylon. If you guys or anyone else has a question, like feel free to jump in or post your questions in the chat, and I'm going to make sure that we get your questions answered. I know some of you already submitted a question, so we're going to get into that in a sec as well. What else I wanted to ask you? I know that, or at least like I've seen like from the applications that we've been receiving for the accelerator, many of the ventures building in that space are very science heavy.
Mhm.
And how can you translate that technical impact into a message that excites like the wider audience, something that's more digestible, as you said?
Mm, mm. Okay, yeah, that's always like a bit of a tricky one because it's obviously it depends a bit on the context of like exactly the area that you're in and so forth. Um, One way of how to do it is what I mentioned a bit like earlier. It was like, how can you make this a bit more human, a bit more,
Mm,
how does it affect like anybody's life? That's like obviously the jackpot. If you, let's say, affect somehow daily people's lives, that's like jackpot because that's like everybody needs to brush their teeth, everybody needs to eat and so forth. So if you have something around that line of like something that is very repetitive that people do every day, then try to use that as a bit of an example. If you have something very, very specific that is, let's say, more related to companies as well, look again a bit like, okay, how often does that really happen to them? So if you have a solution and the company needs it, like say once a year, it's obviously very need to be very, very spot on in terms of communication because you only have that one shot once a year. So for example, tax returns, you need to be very, very, very sharp of like, hey, this is like, hey, we can really save you a lot of time, a lot of work and so forth. And this is this major pain for you because for 3 weeks, you're not sure what you're doing. And then even when you do everything right, you still feel like, oh, I forgot something. So ideally, really try to think about things of like, how is this affecting the daily life within a company or within a citizen? So depending of if you're selling B2C or B2B. When it comes to science, um, there is something like it's called a bit of the mom. It's called the mom test, and so you just like try to explain it to your mom. Or I personally like to explain it to my grandmother. It's even better. Try to explain it to your mom in the most simple words, and then quite often that is the sort of communication that you actually should often use in your pitch deck, on your website, in your communication, because the theory is like often people say like, I need to use all these kind of fancy words that only like a small group of people can understand because they're going to get it. But you kind of exclude all the other potential supporters that potentially could look out for you with their eyes and their ears by alienating them by using a language that's just not everybody understands. So I'm always a big fan of like use very, very, very simple language at the front and then go deeper and deeper and deeper. So yes, on your website, go really hardcore on the science, really show that you know what you're doing, show that you have the patents, show that there's really like a scientific team that is not just like, vibe sciencing and like solving shallow things or whatever. Give that depth, but at the
mhm,
forefront, explain it in the simple, most possible way of, again, problem, why solution exists, how your science roughly works for like a 5-year, 6-year old, 10-year old. Stop maximum at 14 years old, really in terms of like reading level and so forth, because then you have like more people that can look out for you and that say like, you know what, it's not a solution for me, but next time I hear about somebody, I actually know I can refer them back to you because at least understand what you're doing. If they don't understand what you're doing, they can't look out for you.
yeah, I think that's always the hardest part if you have a very science heavy technology. Like, how can you translate it to max of 14 years old, especially if you
Mm.
probably don't have the resources to have an in-house marketing team yet?
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. It's definitely not easy. I mean, that's always like ideally in a co-founding team, you look for complementary skills. So again, just personal recommendation. I would always try to go for a co-founding team that is not necessarily having 3 times the same skills. So like 3 scientists, it's awesome from the vibe, it's awesome from the camaraderie and from the friendships. But usually I would always in the co-founding team, I would always try to at least go for a mix of different skills so that you can kind of complement each other um,
Mhm.
to solve that. Because communication, to be honest, is going to be huge, 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 huge part of your work. You have to convince investors, you have to convince clients, you will have to convince the public, the government. Like your solution can't grow outside your own bubble if you suck at communication. So it's definitely one of the key skills that I'm always kind of hammering on about because it's just like 360 in your daily ecopreneur life.
Absolutely. And we have the first question submitted from Alex. I mean, Alex, by the way, if you want to like unmute and share your question, feel free to. If not, happy to read it out for you.
Sure. Hey, hi. Nice to see you again. Hi, Oliver.
Alex. Hi, Alex.
Yeah, I could read it if it's more simpler like that. Or I could tell my idea. So we build a device which is something which could create peer-to-peer energy transfer in a community. It's something like a counter for energy. And we are in the situation as we was with the first phone. We build this device, but you can't use it having, or you can start using it by having somebody on another part. And now the users need to understand the whole story to make the first acquisition. But in the same time, they are thinking, yeah, but till those guys will buy 500 devices, it will be so much time. Maybe I should wait to be. So we are in the point where we need to find the innovators in this sector. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, understand. I think a bit the problem. Of course, there's always like a thank you so much for sharing the link as well. I'm gonna check it out later as well. Okay, there's like a couple of things that so as soon as you have it's what they call often like an ocean, you know. So there's like you're creating the market, you have to create the demand and so forth. There's a number of things that unfortunately you have to do that you can't really skip. The first one is you need to do a lot of work in terms of communication, in terms of awareness creation, and in terms of knowledge creation of like, okay, why, again, I'm repeating myself, but it's really, really important because it's like without this, especially this innovative solutions just don't work, is you need to educate. Why is this problem? What is the solution? How does it going to affect the daily lives and so forth? So there's like, you need to just be clear as soon as you have something that is very, very innovative and that is ocean, tons of resources need to go, unfortunately, in education and awareness creation. Second bit is you already mentioned it actually, you need to manage the early adopters. So I always like the pain is the pitch. Who are really the people that feel this pain the most that you're trying to solve? So like, of course, the earlier innovators, but like try to find the people that really feel this pain potentially the highest, you know, because it's the kind of a proof of your hypothesis. If you can't find people that feel this pain really, really strongly, it's going to be very hard, because if you can't find that in the early adopters, there's a high chance that you're not going to really find it in the broader markets later on. So I would say like, look out, like think really, really hard about like who in your potential early adopters is finding this. When it then comes to converting them, is like trying to find realistically, and even if you just have 1, 2, 3 pilots, but you really need to get them on board, even if it's unpaid, try to find a way how you can make it work. You really need to get that realistic live experience with them to build up use cases that you can then use again to communicate, to understand, blah, blah, blah. And then the third one I would say is like, it's a bit more having to do with behavior science. So how do we are a species of habits. So we really love habits. We really love to redo things exactly the same way and so forth. So giving you an example, the telephone. Now, if somebody would come up with something better to communicate and so forth, they have a bit of a hard time because we get really used to that telephone. And again, as you were saying, you have this network effects. So you need a bit of a chicken and egg game. You need other people that have.
Oh, I think with.
So the problem there is that you have a bit like, you need to work a bit of behavior science of like, how do people change behaviors? And that's usually you dock in at a behavior that they already do. So if we stay with telephones, when do they use during the day? When do they use their telephone? Why do they use the telephone and so forth? And so you try at first in the first stage, you try to dock on a habit that they already do, rather than totally trying to create like a totally new one somewhere during the day. So you try to dock on the behavior that they already do. So for a B2C, that is like, okay, people brush their teeth and then I want them to do something else. So I'm going to position my solution as something that they do after brushing their teeth. Same goes for business. If they're already doing something in a solar business, if they're already doing something, everybody does it. Try to dock on an existing business behavior that they do to get started.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'll think about that last part on for understanding where can we inject our device in them behavior by. Actually, it's a connection with the phone already. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has other questions, feel free to jump in. Think about how you want to phrase it. In the meantime, I'm going to read out a question that came through earlier. So this question is from Maria. She's the founder of NatureTech. So just for you, Oliver, quick background. They're the largest manufacturer in Central and Eastern Europe of high quality protein products from insects.
Cool. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's asking, what has been your strategy for making the positive impact of NatureTech both measurable and visible to stakeholders?
Okay, so for her, all right. So the first one is like, okay, you sounds at least like she's working on a substitute to normal protein, you know?
Yeah.
So the beauty in her business case is a bit like easier because she has a really great story to work with in terms of communication. She has the old how the system is working and the bad protein, so to say, which is coming from cow, chicken, pork, and so forth. So she knows that there's like tons of data on that one. So she chooses the one. First of all, she makes really good homework on, okay, what is the status quo? How do we currently get protein powder? What kind of impact does it have on health? Again, always lead with the human, not with nature. Even though you're like predominantly you want to fix the nature thing, always lead with the human, not with nature. Like later on a bit nature arguments, but first lead with the human. So what are the health impacts that it have and so forth? So first health, then nature impacts. And the beauty of this is like with animal protein, it uses tons of water, tons of habitat needs to be cleared for like animal protein, CO2. So she works with quite clear and easy metrics that are kind of a bit like known. So she has a bit of an easier case. And then she shows the improvement. So really easy, really black and white. So now the water usage is much less because now you use insects. So I would assume you don't need as much water. You don't have probably CO2. You don't have methane because of the no animal farts and burps and so forth. You don't have forest clearing because the insect, I would imagine that they breed them and so forth. Then you could, so like basically she can show really clearly like the black and white and position herself to show like, hey, this is like creating all this kind of positive impacts. And then as soon as you have that data, it's really nice. I always kind of see it in this way of like work with the heart and with the brain. So bring arguments for the brain, which is your data. So you bring data arguments, but use your heart as well. So explain to them a bit like, you can use different narratives there. You say like, you take a bit the children approach where you say like, hey, future generations would like to have a habitable planet this bit as well. Or use the approach of like, that this is like really a much healthier solution, but use stories of like your customers to bring the data to life, because just data is just going to convert the 25% of our society that are just analytical thinking. But a lot of us, we make our emotions, also do a lot of this decision making, and humor. So as soon as you use actually humor, emotions, and analytics in your communication, you cover up 75% of the human population. So always try to bring in those three types of like arguments into each of the communication. That's usually a bit like the secret to success. And that's no matter if you do B2B, if you do government deals, if you do B2C, doesn't matter. You always have to deal with people. You will have to convince your local mayor, you have to convince the CEO, the CFO, you have to convince the mom. So using data, humor, emotions, will make a huge difference.
Well, maybe a follow-up question on that. I think many of the founders that I've spoken with now who are applying for the accelerator, they have built a solution, but the solution has so many implications. Like let's say it can be used for wildfire prevention. It can be used from governments. Like, how do you choose like what is the right way to what's the right approach to take? And also, if anyone wants to jump on that question, feel free to.
Yeah, super easy. I had visual thinking in terms of like, okay, of course, I would always love it to be impact. The answer should be impact. You know, what is the persona where you think you can help nature the most? Where can the potential impact be the highest? But now being a bit in this journey, I have to say is like, take the realistic one with the least resistance where you can build a foundation from. Because to be totally honest with you, and I told you I'm not going to be holding back and I'm going to be an open book, is like failure rate in startup is already super high. Failure in startups that try to change the world is obviously even higher, because like you don't have only the financial bottom line that you care about, but the impact bottom line. And so it's just by default, there's a much smaller chance for you to succeed. But how can you succeed? By trying to go step by step. And first, always go solid foundation, solid foundation, solid foundation, solid foundation. So figure out how much runway do we have? So really like how much money, savings, deals, really like how much money do you have? How much is your burn rate? So how much cost do you currently have for creating the solution? And then figuring out who's the realistic ideal customer profile that I can get started with. Because as soon as you get started with and you can build a solid foundation and the start of a business model, building other additional services on top of it, going horizontal, going vertical, that can only happen if you're coming from a source of strength. And that source of strength needs to be built first. And so, really concrete example, you want to work with corporates. Corporates have a very slow sales cycle. So it can be maybe that you start investing into a relationship and only 1 year later you make the sale. Can you afford that or not? And sometimes maybe B2C, B2C is like very fast sales, but it's very small amounts. So you need to figure out like what's really realistic for you. But first step, take one step at a time. First step, solid foundation that you can grow from.
Makes sense. It's always hard, right? Like choosing where to start.
Super hard.
Especially when you're excited about what you're building. It's like, let's just do everything for everyone.
And it's true. And the ecopreneurs, they are totally right. Like if you look from nature, I mean, we literally need to change everything that we need to do. Everything that we do right now, how we eat, how we produce energy, how we move, how we consume, everything needs to change in order to become like nature positive. So they're right. Like there's tons of use cases where nature needs it, but you need to be smart about like where you're starting, because if you don't start right, and if you don't like really figure out like who has the biggest pain and who is willing to pay for that pain, then you're never going to build the castle that you imagine in your head.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Like everyone is always like a little bit shy, and then when we have 5 minutes left, okay, Atanas, go ahead.
Hello everyone, can you see me, Oliver?
Perfect.
Hello, nice to see you, Mirela, Konstantina, Sasha as well, and all the other founders. It's a pleasure. Oliver, I see that you have such a great experience, to be fair, and it's actually huge. So my question to you is, because in my case, I do air quality monitoring in a very specific way with custom algorithms, and most of our clients are governmental agencies. So how do you deal with governments, like governmental agencies, compared to NGOs? Because it's much different in terms of how you approach them, how you present the project, and how you actually keep the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's a really honest and really clear question. Two things before answer. One is personally, I never created or consulted a company that was selling to government. So just like with a grain of salt. Second, however, is both of my parents like work for the government. One was working for is still working for the NATO and even worked in Brussels, and my mom is working in the environmental agency of Germany. So I still think I can judge and I can still give you a bit of hints based on the experiences that they share with me. So if you think corporate takes a lot of time in order to make a decision, just like, I don't want to say maybe 10 times this, but like, just be aware that like decisions take like ages, to do. So just be a bit aware of that. So in order for that to kind of convince them to get them on board, it's always obviously much easier often on a local level to then go like regional level to then go country level, So ideally, even though it's maybe not right your ambition and so forth, I would always say like start locally first, because you can literally go to your town hall meetings and so forth. So, and you can build up your I was working with city XXX, so you can build your testimonial list, so to say. So start regional, go bigger. Don't let your ambition be like blindsiding you that you need to start small. So that's number one. Number two is like, again, understanding how they make decisions and who is making the decisions. Who in this agency is actually calling the shots? Can you get somehow closer to them? On what kind of events do they go? Is there some way of like how to get in contact with them? Third, what kind of like what are they after really? Because politicians and government agencies, they have like different motivations. So for some people, it's like maybe education. For some, maybe it's like, like climate fight. For some, maybe it's mobility and so forth. So try to, again, use arguments that bring forward like this kind of like, you just help them, you just help them in their journey. How can you make it easier for them? So use the arguments how yours really happens. So if they really care about health, you use a lot of the air quality data. If it's, for example, for cost, then you kind of make your case how this is very cost effective because it does X, Y, Z, So that's and then fourth, I would say is like, have really like this kind of arguments written out in a way that can be easily shared internally in the government, because governments often like they're really old school. A lot of it is via mail, a lot of it is via PDF. Sometimes it's even literally mail. So try to create like arguments that they can really forward really easily internally to get it going. A couple of like just quick hints.
Thank you so much for that. Just to say that I'm fully on board with you, because I started first with the program in my university, because there we have a dedicated university sustainability major, and basically from there I spun to the local council, then from the local council to the actual country government, and then I'm looking to expand to Europe as well. So basically, further to the point with the right people. Starting from the university, I met the first person, then I was referred to the next one, and then to the next, and the next, and the next, and that's how the things are happening. And basically, we last week I actually met a person from European Union. I was referred to.
Nice.
So basically, the things which you're saying are correct.
Thank you. That's good. And as well, like just as a kind of a like work a lot on, this is just a general ecopreneur tip, but work on your credibility. So if people are Googling your name, what comes up? Because like people gonna, even in governments, that they know how to use Google and so forth. So they're gonna check you out, like what you're doing, if you're legit and so forth. So website, LinkedIn profile, if you were drinking as a like teenager or whatever, and that is like the first thing that comes up as soon as people Google your name. Hey, maybe have a look at your Facebook profile. Sometimes there's also quick wins in terms of like where you can just like improve your credibility quite a lot. So for example, the EU has a program, it's called Climate Impact Ambassador. And so you can quite easy apply for that. And then you become like a Climate Impact Ambassador by the European Union. You have, again, the label of the European Union on your kind of profile and so forth. So there's just like certain tricks that you can do in order to like, not tricks, but like just signals so that they can trust you. And governments, they don't like risk at all when it comes to the data, when it comes to the activities. They hate risk. So you really need to show them all this kind of proof that you're like the good deal.
Thank you so much for that.
Awesome. And we have a question from Sasha, one of the partners and co-founders of
Thank you very much, Oliver. It is always very, very inspiring to listen to you. I have maybe at the end of our time one more general question based on your really broad experience. People understand financial return. The investors would really rate a company based on the money that they can make in near or a bit longer future. How we can promote the idea for nature return in addition to the financial, not contradicting on it, but obviously, although I know there are algorithms that are calculating and quantifying in money what are the damages on nature or native adaptation. So it is a long journey. What is your, if you have a quick advice that will help everybody to really add to the both data, also an argument, speaking to different audiences? Over.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the nail in its head. It's return of investment is like the big, maybe enemy is maybe too much of a strong word, but it's like one of the major blockers, like why we don't make the progress that we should be making. And so, to be honest, I try to often really take pragmatic approaches. So I try to already calculate for them what return of investment could look for who is in front of me. So again, if we talk about like a B2B, you can have a look of like every company depends on nature. There's like no way around it. Even like service companies, like who's running the show, is if your service companies all run on AI, even if you're all run on AI, what does AI need? It needs the minerals, it needs water, it needs electricity and so forth. Where is it all coming from? Or from nature. So you help them to calculate the return of investment based on the company. And so there's like a multiple facet of what you can do. So first, of course, you look at the dependencies. So what are really all the different dependencies when it comes to nature? You can sometimes really figure out like what the risk involvement is. So if you work with insurances, with banks and so forth, they're already like one of the first movers. Why? Because they know if they don't get this into order, then they're risking a lot of their money that they have to put on the line. And so like trying to figuring out, okay, where are the biggest dependencies, where nature is really impacting that business. On a hard skill, on a hard kind of perspective. And then even on a soft perspective, I wouldn't actually know. It's actually hard as well. So with a brand, you can make the case often. You look a bit in the competitive landscape and you look if there's already a sustainable player in there or not. So for example, in the fashion, that's what Patagonia did. Patagonia came into this kind of entire fashion industry and said like, we're going to do things differently. And because they did things so differently, the return of investment was like tremendously. I mean, they're like a family-run company, like privately run fund company, and they're still, they're making billions. And so you can make actually return of investment by doing really something fundamentally for nature. So you can build a better brand. You can reduce the CAC, so like the cost of acquisition. So if you have a very strong regenerative product, then most likely people more likely to support you if your product is good, bringing down the CAC. So you can calculate how much of the CAC, for example, can be saved. You can add on the lifetime value because you can say like, okay, people are going to be more likely to stay with us. And so you're going to have a change in lifetime value. You have maybe a change of brand perception. So your brand is going to be more aware. So you have to spend less on your brand awareness. Employees, if they go more into nature, they have less sick days because they have less mental health challenges. They have less physical challenges. So what is the cost? How many sick days do you have right now by boosting more nature locally, for example, in front of your office and so forth? You can actually boost this. So there's just like tons of ways how you can calculate the return of investment based on the company that is in front of you. Is it work? Fucking hell, yeah, unfortunately it is. But that's a bit like the CFO is the gatekeeper quite often. So that's like how I see it.
Okay, we're
Thank
almost
you.
coming to time. We might be able to get one more question from the audience. So think about that while I read out one of the community questions that was submitted. So I had to read this a few times, however.
Okay.
So the question is from Theodore.
Okay.
Maybe just a bit of a background about him. He is a researcher in advanced chemical recycling of wastewater
Okay,
to
I saw this
recover
question.
yeah, to recover compounds for strategic industries like fertilizers, photovoltaics, batteries, and semiconductors. So the question is, how can we scale bio-based innovation from wastewater given the existing infrastructure lock-ins?
Yeah, that's like to be honest, like I'm a business and biodiversity guy. I'm like not necessarily like a specialist when it comes to wastewater infrastructure. Is like infrastructure is definitely not the sexiest, but like a really, really crucial topic. It's often like something overlooked. People want to do software. People want to do like consumer goods. It's the sexy things. But actually, a lot of our infrastructure needs to change. When there is an infrastructure login, I actually consult right now H2R, who are building new form of gas turbines that not running on gas but on hydrogen, and that are actually helping in the transition. So you can actually, they build like a turbine that you can now put into the normal gas turbine, and it will help in the transition, and it can do from 0% to 100% of hydrogen. So it's a transition technology as well as a final destination technology. So when you have lock-in, I always recommend that looking something is, this is of course like what they created is like, that's the holy grail. If you can create something that is the final destination technology plus the transition technology, try to go for that one. When you have that sort of lock-in, a bit what we chatted a bit earlier, like even when you have that sort of lock-in, you need to be even more precise of like, okay, how are cost savings? So lock-in is often like, okay, infrastructure is not invested in if it's a lot of money that needs to be spent. So try to make the case how this is going to save money rather than spend. Even if there's some certain initial cost, show them that over a time period of, ideally, the shorter the possible, the better. But like try to be realistic. Let's say after like 10 years, you actually have like a cost reduction year over year of XXX. That's usually where the ice gets bigger. Health risks. So like with wastewater, I would assume there's like also some health risk involved. So if you can maybe make the case of like there's some health cost savings that can be made, ideal. And then in terms of the environmental impact, because in the end, I give you a really good example because we have a wastewater issue here where I live. So I live right at the ocean. It's a tourism town. What happens when the rain falls? The wastewater systems are not used to this. So the wastewater systems are overflowing. Where does all the wastewater go? Into the ocean. What happens if it goes into the ocean? Of course, it messes up the ecosystem really, really bad. But it also hurts the local economy because what happens now? Beaches need to be closed. People get sick, don't come back. So lifetime value, so to say, if you once a tourist and you get sick on the beach because there was like poo flowing in the water and so forth, you're not going to come back. Means less lifetime value over that one customer tourist coming back. Fishers who wants to eat fish, like maybe even the fish dies because of coral bleaching and so forth. So even with this kind of really niche topics and so forth, you can always find arguments. Sometimes maybe you need to be a bit more creative, but really look at the impacts. Try to, we often talk about user journeys, also talk a bit about the impact journey of like, look all the different factors of like where your solution is going to have a positive impact. Focus a lot on the health bit and focus a lot on the financial bit. These are usually two strong arguments that work the best. And then have additional arguments, so to say, around it that you can play whenever you're sitting in front of the right person. So if you have, for example, a philanthropist in front of you that loves nature, then go all ahead on the nature arguments. But if you have a local politician that is very streamlined on their budget, talking about, like how important koala bears are or foxes or something, realistically, it's not going to jump on it.
Okay, we are coming to time, and I'm known for being very precise with timings. Are there any last questions? And before you get the strength, just a reminder to please share your feedback. I'm gonna post it here in the chat. And also, if you're building in the intersection of nature and technology, another reminder, Science Accelerator applications are open until the 7th. We are accepting application of first come, first served basis. So we've already have, as you've met, some of the participants, but there are a few spots left. So apply if that's something that's interesting to you. Any questions?
Can I have another one?
Sure.
This is more business related, but maybe it makes sense. So we are in a position of acquiring a big batch of devices from somebody from South Africa. But in the same time, this will lower our control on the business part, on the entire business. And we are looking, besides choosing to push and grow actually the efficiency of energy and planet, and like it's more about the civilization layer which we have as a vision or the meaning of our company. But in the same time, if we are going in this direction, we don't know if we could support the growing of the company as a business and to scale it as we wish to do it. What would you?
Okay. Is scaling even on the radar right now, or do you still have to find product market fit?
We need to find a product market fit.
Okay. Scaling is always like, we as ecopreneurs, we always need to be careful of like where our brain capacity and our energy goes towards to, you know, especially at the beginning. Ecopreneurs, and me included, I make this mistake all the time, is like sometimes we put a bit too much emphasis on like the future and like what kind of future scenarios could happen and so forth, and that is at the scaling phase, rather than putting, let's say, 80 to 20 more on like, okay, what's the here now, and what does a company need as a next step, so to say. So when it comes to working with subcontractors, I would call it a bit like, you know, right, sounds like a subcontractor they have. So if that subcontractor is not going against your mission, because like in the end, if how you get there is not aligned with where you want to go, I wouldn't do this. But in the end, if they allow you to test faster, test better, your initial hypothesis, then I would all go for it. If they, for example, use slavery, if they use like illegally mined things, and I wouldn't do it, like, because the end doesn't justify the means, at least in how I run business, but leave that up to you. But so if they just allow you, they're legit, they're not doing anything bad. Maybe they don't do as good, but I think that is okay for the start. And then you can always go like later on, you can make the decisions, either because you have a higher demand, you can say like, we want to keep on working with you, but you need to do XXXXX. Or you say, you know what, actually, we are now much more equipped to build this ourselves, and we don't want to outsource this. I would always just be reflecting on like, okay, what are the high value tasks that really you need to do and only you can do, and try to outsource as many as possible of the non-super value or crucial tasks that maybe somebody else can do better for you, maybe cheaper for you, and so forth. And so right now, what the business needs is that you need to find product market fit, and what allows you to do that. And then later on, scaling is really something that it will create, but tackle it when you cross the bridge. I would say a bit like, be a bit aware of it. You should not be blindsided. You should definitely have it, but park it and take the immediate ones first. Yeah.
Great.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Alex, and thanks, Oliver. Oh wow, more hands. Okay. What I'm
still good. Like I still have like
that always. Oh yeah, awesome. That's great. If anyone needs to head out, please do. George, I know you haven't had the word, so George first, and then Nathanes again for a second question.
Thank you, Mirela. Hi, Oliver. Thank you
Hey,
for
Josh.
all the insights. So I'm building these long-range drones. So think of it like a fixed-wing plane that can autonomously fly for like 3 hours.
Nice.
So very long range. And we're currently building the technology with onboard AI tracking to detect wildfires
Cool.
with
Awesome.
imaging. So we want to deploy these in mountainous ranges, which are hard to monitor terrain, so that we can prevent wildfires in the early stages.
Awesome.
But one of the issues in Bulgaria is that most of the politicians kind of have a benefit of having wildfires due to corruption. So if we try to go through politics, you would hit a roadblock. And I'm questioning whether you have any experience with such corruption and whether raising funds through donations on a national level would be a more viable path strictly for this use case.
Yeah. First of all, like for everybody that is in this call, very, very good problem pitch. George was very, very clear on like the problem that he's solving, how they're solving it, what is different. You know, he said like they take 3 hours. We can go into remote locations rather than very, very good pitch. So politicians, corruptions, fun topic. I lived in corrupt countries again, so I never worked with governments that are corrupt. So again, don't have like firsthand experience. Wouldn't necessarily really recommend it either. But like I lived in corrupt countries, so my tips that I give you or like my feedback is regarding this. So if you have corruption on a really large scale that you really feel like, okay, this is a blocker and I can't pursue this way, is like you go to the people that have a very invested interest in this, that can cause more pressure on the local governments. So let's say wildfires, the beauty, you know, in the miserable, is that it creates tons of damages. So who's first impacted? Timber, you know, it's probably like full with timber. So timber companies, all kind of wood, kind of like everything that is down the value chain in terms of wood, you know, so like and anything that comes from the forest, basically. So if you're any value that is extracted right now in your country from the forest could be they have a vast interest. The bigger the investment into their kind of forest, the higher the interest is. So if you have like a timber company that is having a monopoly or that is really big, have a go there. Sometimes, unfortunately, they are kind of run by the government or they're heavily influenced. But so you need to see, but the kind of companies I would go for first, like who in the free economy is dependent on and is damaged by wildfires. First one. Second one, insurances. So insurances, maybe they have, if there's a wildfire, maybe they need to pay out all the kind of damages. So they have a very vast interest in like technology that helps them to avoid this and mitigate this kind of risks. So insurance, banks. So banks, obviously, they don't want their investment either in the companies or in real estate and so forth go down. Real estate. So if you have ideally real estate, again, look at real estate is like very horizontal. So don't look necessarily at real estate of like social building, because unfortunately, as it's really fucked up what I'm going to say, but a lot of people unfortunately don't care as much. What they care often about is like the rich folks, you know, the rich folks, like where do they live? Can you somehow influence them so that they can maybe bring this technology in? Or again, companies, so real estate of companies. So I would look a bit at this kind of like free sector. That's what's, so B2B, I would try to explore first. If you also run into problems that B2B is really, really not picking up on this, then you need to kind of get the wider public involved. Because like in the end, the wider public has an interest of like, I don't want to lose my house. I don't want to lose my livelihood. So then you need to come up with a kind of new approach and do maybe some sort of a Kickstarter thing, so that it kind of you can create some first financial investment. Plus it's mostly about like getting the word out there so that they creates pressure on the government to actually invest into you. But I would first go to B2B and only then B2C in terms of prioritization, because I just believe that there's a stronger involvement and a stronger self-interest in companies than citizens.
That is such a fresh perspective. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Tanas, you had a second question?
Yeah, first, I just want to say, really good question, George. And just to mention that if you put pressure to the government, you have to protect yourself, not only physically, but also online. Because I've already done that, not in Bulgaria, and there were specific actions taken against me. So you also need to follow specific standards about that. So my question to you, Oliver, is because I checked your LinkedIn in your website, and I wrote down one question. I'm basically interested in your future business model. How are you going to expand to new, or do you actually plan to expand to new geographies? And also, do you plan to deepen partnerships with larger organizations?
Yeah. So first of all, just to finish up what you said, like George, like this was only like business related tip, like not like safety and so forth. Like totally, I agree with what Anna says. So if you work in a corporate government, then please take care of your safety and health. That has the top priority. That was solely business related tips. So regarding geographies, we're already working worldwide. So like we are. The biodiversity crisis, the nature crisis is a global one. So we try to create solutions for the global audience. We know that right now we have a strong focus in Europe and a strong focus in the UK and United States. That's where a lot of our people, like in the community so far, sit because we speak in English. And it's also like in the end, everything is run through LinkedIn. Like my entire, like how I reach people is through LinkedIn, and LinkedIn still has like a higher like market share, let's say, in this kind of countries. So globally already active. In terms of partners, yes. So with Wildya, we have like different sort of partnerships that we do. So we have partnerships in terms of like, like with Sky. Now we have like the partnership, hey, like I'll come on this and I can provide a bit of free value for you guys and so forth. So we have this kind of sort of partnerships. We have partnerships where we bring in ecopreneurs so that they share how they building their nature startup, how they building their nature NGO, so that other people can learn. Because like you, even like in this room, you're here, you want to learn, you want to improve. You already took tons of steps. It doesn't seem that way because maybe you feel like, you're still not living up to where you actually want to be, but you already took tons of steps. Other people are not even there yet. So we want to make it as easy as possible, no matter where you're on that journey, that you get the support so that we can remove the friction. Because as the Sky and team also like works on is basically we need to remove friction so that your life gets easier. And so this is like all what Wildya is about. And we also have like partnerships, for example, if you have certain products that we can promote and so forth, then we happily promote them because we need to create, sort of say, wildlife corridors between our solutions. So for example, always look out for Alex works in solar, like you work with air monitor and air quality monitoring. George works with wildfires. Always have a conversation between each other, how you can also push each other, because wildfires have a very severe impact on air quality, and so like just like work together, collaborate together, because in our space it's like so important. We are always running against like this massive hill and so forth. So it's really important that we have each other's back and help each other's out and be each other's eyes and ears when deals could maybe potentially be made.
Thank you very much for that.
You're mute.
Always. Thank you so much, Oliver. It's been super interesting and an absolute pleasure to chat to you. Before we head out, how can people join Wildya? And is there anything you want us to know about the community? And yeah, how can we join?
Yeah, super. Like I put the link of Wildya and also my profile. I have the LinkedIn, so if you have any questions, anything was not clear, then feel free to reach out there. And Wildya, pretty simple. You can join, you can see our website, and then you can make decision for yourself. Hey, do you maybe want to join the community? Do you want to join one of our boot camps? Do you want to work on one-to-one in the future? You see a bit like whatever floats your boat. Or if you just want to subscribe to our newsletter, I send like every week I send like a business tip to Ecopreneurs, so that hopefully making it a bit easier, plus working on some other tools. So yeah, feel free, wherever you are, wherever you vibed with whatever I was saying. And again, really important. Thank you so much, everybody, for doing what you do. We didn't have like now time to like explore all the different solutions in this phone call here, but thank you so much that you try to make this world a bit better and a lot wilder. And your solution, no matter what you're working on, I can already tell you, you're working on like a problem that needs to be solved, but you just need to figure out like how you can make that problem like really visible for people so that they understand it, so they get on board to help you to solve it.
Yeah, not an easy task. Better get on with it.
No, exactly.
Awesome. Thanks, Oliver, and thanks everyone for joining. See you soon.
To everybody.